The Nature of the Psyche by Jane Roberts. Chapter 8. And this is Seth speaking now. The next chapter, which I believe is 8, Dreams, Creativity, Languages, and Cordellas. You may put Cordellas in quotes. Though you may not realize it, you really manage your subjective lines in a rather circular fashion. Pretend that the present moment is like a wheel, with your concentration at the hub. To maintain what you think of it as a time momentum, the hub is connected by spokes to the exterior circular framework. Otherwise, the hub alone would get you nowhere, and your moment would not even give you a bumpy ride. Your journey through time, however, seems to go smoothly. The wheels roll ever forward. It can roll backward as well, but in your intentness, you have a forward direction in mind, and to go backward would seem to divert you from your purpose. The forward motion brings you into the future, out of the past, from which it seems to you you are emerging. So you plot a straight course, it seems, through time, never realizing, in our analogy, that the wheel's circular motion allows you to transverse this ongoing road. The hub of the present, therefore, is held together by the spokes. These have nothing to do with your ideas of cause and effect at all. Instead, they refer to the circular motion of your own psyche as it seems to progress in time. Each present moment of your experience is dependent upon the future as well as the past, your death as well as your birth. Your birth and your death are built in, so to speak, together, one implied in the other. You could not die unless you were the kind of creature who was born, nor could you have a present moment as you consider it. Your body is aware of the fact of its death at birth, and of its birth at its death, for all its possibilities for action to take place in the area in between. Death is therefore as creative as birth, and as necessary for action and consciousness in your terms. It is not quite that simple, however, for you live in the midst of multitudinous small deaths and births all the time, that are registered by the body and the psyche. Consciously, you are usually unaware of them. Logical thought, using usual definitions, deals with cause and effect, and depends upon a straight sequence of time for its framework. It builds step upon step. It is woven into your language. According to logical thought and language, you may say, I'm going to a party today because I was invited last week, and I said I would attend. That makes sense. You cannot say, I'm going to a party today because I'm going to meet an individual there who will be very important in my life 5 years from now. That does not make sense in terms of logical thought or language. For in the last example, cause and effect would exist simultaneously, or worse, the effect would exist before the cause. On all other than normally conscious levels, however, you deal very effectively with probabilities. The cells maintain their integrity by choosing one probability above the others. The present hub of the wheel, therefore, is but one prominent present, operationally valid. Cause and effect, as you think of them, appear only because of the motion, the relative motion of the wheel in our analogy. When your eyes are on the road of time, therefore, you forget the circular motion of your being. When you dream or sleep, however, the world of cause and effect either vanishes or appears confused and chaotic. normal daytime images are mixed and matched, so that the combinations are formed quite different from those seen in the daylight. The known rules that govern the behavior of creatures and objects in dreams no longer seems to apply. Past, present, and future merge in a seemingly bizarre alliance in which, were you waking, you would lose all mental footing. The circular nature of the psyche, to some extent, makes itself known. When you think of dreams, you usually consider those aspects of it only, commenting perhaps upon the strange activities, the odd juxtapositions, and the strange character of dream life itself. Few are struck by the fact of their dream's own order, or impressed by the ultimate restraint that allows such sometimes spectacular events to occur in such a relatively restricted physical framework. For example, in a dream of 20 minutes, events that would ordinarily take years can be experienced. The body ages its 20 minutes of time, and that is all. In dreams, experience is peripheral, in that it dips into your time and touches it, leaving ripples, but the dream events themselves exist largely out of time. Dream experience is ordered in a circular fashion. Sometimes it never touches the hub of your present moment at all, as you think of it, as far as your memory is concerned. Yet the dream is, and it is registered at all other levels of your existence, including the cellular. You always translate experience into terms that you can understand. Of course, the translation is real. The dream, as you recall, it is already a translation. The dream, as you recall it, is already a translation, then, but an experienced one, as a language that you know is, again dependent upon other languages, and implied pauses and silences. So the dream that you experience and recall is also one statement of the psyche coming into prominence, but it is also dependent upon other events that you do not recall, and that your consciousness, as it now operates, must automatically translate into its own terms. On a physical level, your body reacts to information about the environment with which you are not consciously concerned. That same information is highly important to the body's integrity, however, and therefore to your own mental stance. On cellular levels, the body has a picture not only of its own present condition, but of all those aspects of the physical environment that affect its own condition. In its own codified fashion, it is not only aware of local weather conditions, for example, but of all those world patterns of weather upon which the local area is dependent. It then prepares itself ahead of time to meet whatever challenges of adjustment will be necessary. It weighs probabilities. It reacts to pressures of various kinds. You are aware of pressure through touch, for instance, but in another version of that sense entirely, the cells react to air pressure. The body knows to the most precise degree the measurements involving radiation of all kinds. At one level, then, the body itself is a picture of reality of its own, upon which your conscious reality must be based. And yet, the body's terms of recognition or knowledge exist in terms so alien to your conscious ones as to be incomprehensible. Your conscious order, therefore, rides upon this greater circular kind of knowledge. Generally speaking, the psyche has the same kind of instant overall comprehension of psychological events and environments as your body has of physical ones. It is then aware of your overall psychological climate, locally as it involves you personally, and in world terms. Your actions take place with such seeming smoothness that you do not realize the order involved. A volcanic eruption in one corner of the world will ultimately affect the entire Earth in varying degrees. An emotional eruption will do the same thing on another level, altering the local area primarily, but also sending out its ripples into the mass psychological environment. The psyche's picture of reality, then, would be equally incomprehensible to the conscious mind because of the intense focus upon singularity that your usual consciousness requires. Your dreams often give you glimpses, however, of the psyche's picture of reality in that regard. You become aware of probabilities as actions, sometimes that seem to have no connection with your own, but which are related to them in the greater scheme of interaction that ordinarily you do not comprehend. When you grow from a baby to an adult, you do not just grow tall, you grow all about yourself, adding weight and thickness as well. To some extent, events grow in the same fashion and from the inside out as you do. In a dream, you are closer to those stages in which events are born. In your own terms, they emerge from the future and form the past, and are given vitality because of creative tension that exists between what you think of as your birth and your death. You make sentences out of the alphabet of your language. You speak these or write them and use them to communicate. Events can be considered in the same fashion. As psychological sentences put together from the alphabet of the senses. Let me start that sentence over again. Events can be considered in the same fashion as psychological sentences put together from the alphabet of the senses, experienced sentences that are lived instead of written, formed into perceived history instead of just being penned, for example, into a book about history. I said that your language to some extent programs your experience. There is a language of the senses, however, that gives you biological perception, experience, and communication. It forms the nature of the events that you can perceive, puts experiences together so that it is physically felt. All your written or verbal languages have to be based upon this biological alphabet. There is far greater leeway here than there is in any of your spoken or written languages. I use the word Cordella to express the source out of which such languages spring. There are many correlations, of course, between your language and your body. Your spoken language is dependent upon your breath, and even written language is dependent upon the rapidity with which messages can leap the nerve endings. Biological cordellas must then be the source for physical languages, but the cordellas themselves arise from the psyche's greater knowledge, as it forms the physical mechanism to begin with. Dreams are a language of the psyche in which man's nature merges in time, and out of it he has sense experiences. He runs, though he lies in bed. He shouts, though no word is spoken. He still has the language of the flesh, and yet that language is only opaquely connected with the body's mechanisms. He deals with events, yet they do not happen in his bedroom or necessarily in any place that he can find upon awakening. Information flows through the universe at such a rate and in such quantities that you could not possibly process any but a small portion of it. Your physical senses again act almost like a biological alphabet, allowing you to organize and perceive certain kinds of information from which you form the events of your world and the contours of your reality. Your conscious knowledge rests upon an invisible, unspoken, psychological and physical language that provides the inner support for the communications and recognized happenings of conscious life. These inner languages are built up as cordellas, and cordellas are psychic organizational units from which then all alphabets are born. Alphabets imply cordellas, but cannot contain them any more than English can contain Russian, French, Chinese, or any combination. If you try to speak English, you cannot speak Chinese at the same time. One precludes the other, even while one implies the existence of the other, for to that degree all languages have some common roots. In a way, events are like the spoken components of languages, yet voiced in a living form, and not, for example, only sounded. These are based upon the sensual alphabet, which itself emerges from non-sensual cordellas. A sentence is built up as words, parts of speech, verbs and adjectives, subjects and predicates, vowels and syllables, and underneath there is an entire structure that allows you to speak or read to begin with. To some extent, events are built up the same fashion. You form and organize sentences, yet you speak on faith without actually knowing the methods involved in your speaking, so you only recognize the surface of that activity. In the same way, you form events, often without being aware that you do so. It seems that events happen, as it seems words are spoken. You were taught how to construct sentences in school, and you learned how to speak from your elders. You were involved with event making before the time of your birth, however. The psyche forms events in the same way that the ocean forms waves, except that the ocean's waves are confined to its surface or to its basin, while the psyche's events are constantly translated and splash out into mass psychological reality. In waking life, you meet the completed event, so to speak. You encounter events in the area of waking consciousness. In the dream state and at other levels of consciousness, you deal more directly with the information of events. You are usually as unaware of this process as you are in normal practice of the ways in which you form your sentences, which seem to flow from you so automatically. The psyche, as it is turned towards physical reality, is a creator of events, and through them it experiences its own reality, as through your own speech you hear your voice. In dreams, then, you are involved in the inner process by which physical events are formed. You deal with the psychological components of actions which you will take, which you will awake, form into consecutive corporal language that results in the action of your days. Okay, I'm going to read that last part again. In dreams, when you are involved in the inner process by which physical events are formed. In dreams, then, you are involved in the inner process by which physical events are formed. You deal with the psychological components of actions which you will, awake, form into the consecutive corporal language that results in the action of your days. The events that you recognize as official have a unitary nature in time, which precludes those probable versions of them from which they arose, versions that appear to one extent or another in the dream state. Again, if you speak the English sentence, I am here, you cannot speak the Chinese version at the same time. In that regard, in your framework of action, you choose to speak in quotes, one event rather than another. Your formation of events, however, does not simply reside in your unique psychological properties, of course, but is possible because of the corporal alphabet of the flesh. Now, it is possible for any one human being to speak more than one language. It's also possible for you to put physical data together in other ways than are usually used. The body is capable of putting together different languages of reality. In usual terms, for example, your body can only be in one place at one time, and your experience of events is determined in large measure by your body's position. Yet, there are biological mechanisms that allow you to send versions or patterns of your body outside of its prime position and to perceive from those locations. In sleep and dream states, you often do this, correlating the newly perceived data with the usual sense information and organizing it all without a qualm. For that matter, the preciseness of your ordinary sense perception rests firmly upon this greater inner flexibility, which gives you a broad base from which to form your secure focus. Events emerge like spoken words, then into your awareness. You speak, yet who speaks? And in your briefest phrase, what happens? The atoms and molecules within your vocal cords and lungs and lips do not understand one word of the language that they allow you to speak so liquidly. Without their cooperation and awareness, however, not a word would be spoken. Yet, each of those nameless atoms and molecules cooperates in a vast venture, incomprehensible to you, that makes your speech possible, and your reality of events is built up from a cordella of activity in which each spoken word has a history that stretches further back into the annals of time than the most ancient of fossils could remember. I am speaking in your terms of experience, for in each word spoken in your present, you evoke that past time, or you stimulated it into existence so that its reality and yours are coexistent. In dreams, even the past is in the present state. Events are everywhere forming. You make and remake the past as well as the future. You choose from those experiences certain ones as events in normal waking reality. Are your hands tired? While you can speak only one sentence at a time, and in but one language, and while that sentence must be sounded one vowel or syllable at a time, still it's the result of a kind of circular knowledge or experience in which the sentence's beginning and end is known simultaneously. If the end of it were not known, the beginning could not be started so expertly. In the same way, the experienced event occurring in time is dependent upon circular happening, in which beginning and end are entwined. not one occurring before the other, but coexistent. On a conscious level, you could not possibly handle all the information that is available to you on other levels, information upon which your very physical survival depends. To some extent, then, language operates as a screening device, enabling you to communicate certain data while effectively blocking out other kinds. When you speak a sentence, you do not stop to consider all the rules of grammar. You do not mentally diagram the sentence ahead of time. You simply speak more or less automatically. This involves the utmost precision, both mentally and physically. When you experience an event, you do not usually stop either to examine the rules of perception or to wonder what these are. You simply experience or perceive. Those experienced events, however, are also the result of a screening process. They attain their focus, brilliance, and physical validity because they rise into prominence on the backs of other seemingly unperceived events. In the dream state, you work intimately with the inner grammar of events. In dreams, you find the unspoken sentence and the physically unexperienced act. The skeletons of the inner workings of events are there, more obvious. Actions are not yet fully fleshed out. The mechanics of your waking psychological behavior are brilliantly delineated. That state can be explored and utilized far more fully than it is and should be. There will always be a veil between the waking and the sleeping consciousness, for while you are physical, the waking mind can only deal with so much information. It would simply forget what it cannot hold. Your dreams affect your cellular reality, even as that reality is also largely responsible for the fact that you dream in your terms at all. Dreams are a natural product of cellularly tuned consciousness. As fire gives off light, cellularly tuned consciousness gives off dreams. Such a consciousness is at a state of being in which its reality generates more energy and power than it can physically express in its brilliant intersection with physical reality. The sparks generated by each instant of its existence cause additional experiences, perceptions that will not fit in the known moment of the present, for by then, in your terms, that present has already vanished into the past. These events and responses continue to operate, however, particularly in the dream state, when they do not intersect directly with full physical experience, as waking events do. All of these parallel or alternate experiences are then used to construct the physical events that you recognize. Again, you speak a sentence truly so that the end of it comes smoothly, though when you begin, you may not have known consciously what you were going to say. Some part of you knew the sentence's beginning and end at once, however. In dreams, you know the beginning and the end of events in the same fashion. Any one action in your life is taken in context with all the other events from your birth to your death. Now, it seems to you that because you speak one sentence at any given time, rather than 10 other possible versions of it, the sentence as spoken is the correct one. Its probable variations in grammar or tense or inflection escape you entirely. Yet, unconsciously, you may have tried out and discarded all of those, even though you have no memory of such experiences. So, even in forming sentences, you deal with probabilities, and to some extent or other, your body mimics, say, the various muscular responses that might be involved with each unspoken sentence. Even as you speak your sentence with such fine, conscious, nonchalant inner choices. Even as you speak your sentence with such fine, conscious nonchalance, inner choices are still being made. As you consciously check your communications against events occurring outside as you speak. So, while each action of your life is taken in context with all the other actions of your life until your death, this does not mean that your death is predetermined to occur at any given time. As you might change your sentence in the middle from one version to another without even being consciously aware of it. So, you live your life. You also work with probabilities. You are the self who speaks the sentence, and you are the self who lives the life. You are larger than the sentence that you speak, and larger than the life you live. You cannot remember all of the sentences you spoke today. You may have a general idea of what you said. It certainly seems to you that you said one thing at any given time rather than something else. It also seems that witnesses would back you up. It certainly seems that waking events are more steady and dependable than dream events. Waking events happen and vanish quickly. They are experienced directly, with the senses fully participating. But for the instant involvement, you give up larger dimensions of the same actions that exist, but beneath the senses, active participation. In dreams, the preparations for experienced events take place not only in the most minute details, but in the larger context of the world scene. Events fit together, forming a cohesive whole that gives you a global scale of activities. The future history of the world, for example, is worked out now, as in the dream state each individual works with the probable events of private life. That private life exists, however, in a context, social, political, and economic, which is unconsciously apprehended. When a person constructs various probable realities in the dream state, he or she does so also in this larger context in which the probable status of the world is known. Here, events are connected one to the other in a psychic web work that is far more effective than your physical technological system of communication. Here, reality codes are utilized. Knowledge is received and transmitted in electromagnetic patterns, so that one pattern can carry far more units of information than anything you have technologically speaking. Each cell in the body does its part in picking up signals and transmitting them. Some decoding also takes place at that level, so that pertinent information is sent where it belongs, physically speaking. Much information does not even reach the brain. The mind is aware of such data, however. In man, the psychic physical structure has at every moment a complete up-to-date picture of pertinent information about all events that will in any way affect the organization. All events. Much information does not even reach the brain. The mind is aware of such data, however. In man, the psychic, physical structure has at every moment a complete up-to-date picture of pertinent information about all events that will in any way affect the organism. All actions are taken with this information available. In the dream state, such data become transformed again into pseudo-physical pictures, reflections of events that might occur, previews of probable sequences. These are flashed before a consciousness that momentarily focus upon the inner rather than the outer arena of reality. Now, these previews are played out not only for the mind, but for the body as well. In sleep, again, each cell calculates the effect of various probable events upon its own reality. Computations are made so that the body's entire response can be ascertained ahead of time, and the advantages and disadvantages weighed. The body participates in dreaming at the most minute levels. The atoms and molecules themselves possess kinds of consciousness impossible for you to analyze because the scales of your activities are so different. They are information gathering processes, however, containing codified, I don't know if it's codified or codified, electromagnetic properties that slip between all of your devices. The atoms and molecules and all of the seemingly smaller particles within them are again information-carrying processes, and upon them depends your entire interpretation of the nature of events. Again, cellularly attuned consciousness generates dreams. Consciousness riding on a molecular back generates a physical reality and events suited to it. Thinking also rests firmly in the reality of cellular attuned consciousness. Thought takes time and exists by virtue of cellular composition. Consciousness, not focused in cellular construction, involves itself in a kind of direct cognition involving comprehensions that come in a more circular fashion. The creative act is your closest experience to direct cognition. While your consciousness thinks of itself in physical terms, whether you are living or dead, then you will still largely utilize thinking patterns with which you are familiar. Your consciousness is cellularly attuned in life, in that it perceives its own reality through cellular function that forms the bodily apparatus. The psyche is larger than physically attuned consciousness, however. It is the larger context in which you exist. It is intertwined with your own reality as you think of it. On those occasions when you are able to alter your focus momentarily, then the psyche's greater experiences come into play. You are able to at least sense your existence apart from its cellular orientation. The experience, however, is circular and therefore very difficult to verbalize or to organize into your normal patterns of information. You recognize that Earth has an atmosphere. In your limited space travel, you take for granted the fact that different conditions will be met from those encountered upon your planet. There are alterations taken into your calculations, so astronauts know ahead of time that they can expect to encounter weightlessness, for example. Your ideas and experiences with space and matter, however, are determined by your own sense apparatus. What is matter to you might be empty space for beings equipped in an entirely different fashion. Your conscious mind, as you understand it, is the psychological structure that deals with conditions on a physical basis. Sense data are served up, so to speak, more or less, already packaged. The greater inner reality of the psyche, however, is as extensive as the outer space seems to be. When information falls into your conscious mind from those vaster areas, then it is also changed as it travels through various levels of psychological atmosphere until it finally lands or explodes in a series of images or thoughts. You are bombarded with such alien intrusions constantly. The focus of your consciousness blots these out while you are in normal waking state. There are falling stars everywhere, tumbling through the heavens, for example, though you only see some of these in the night sky. It is important during the day that a screening process is used so that the precision of your actions can be maintained. Again, however, that fine precision rests upon an endless amount of information that impinges onto other levels of your psychological reality. Those data then become the raw material, so to speak, from which your physical events are formed. In the dream state, with your body more or less safe and at rest, and without the necessity for precise action, these psychological intrusions become more apparent. Many of your dreams are like the tail end of a comet. Their real life is over, and you see a flash of their disappearance as they strike your own mental atmosphere and explode in a spark of dream images. They are transformed, therefore, as they travel through your own psychological atmosphere. You could not perceive them in your own state, nor can they maintain their native state as they plunge through the far reaches of the psyche. They fall in patterns, forming themselves naturally into the dream contents that fit the contours of your own mind. The resulting structure of the dream suits your reality and no other. As this intrusive matter falls, plummets, or shifts through the levels of your own psychological atmosphere, it is transformed by the conditions it meets. Raindrop patterns in a puddle follow certain laws having to do with the contours of the land, the weather, and the nature of the rain of the clouds, the height from which the raindrops fall, and the conditions operating in the nearby and far portions of the world. If you could properly understand all of that, then by looking into a single puddle, you could tell the past and present weather conditions for the entire planet and follow the probabilities in terms of storms or volcanic eruptions. You cannot do this, of course, yet it is possible. Dreams patter down into psychological puddles. They follow the contours of your psychological reality. They make ever-moving psychic patterns in your mind, rippling outward, the rain that hits your backyard as warm drops, soft and clear, may be hail in areas far above your rooftops, but it changes its form as it falls, again, according to the conditions that it encounters. So these alien intrusions do the same, and the dreams are like the raindrops, for at higher levels they may have quite a different form indeed. There are gullies, hills, mountains, valleys, large continents, small islands upon the earth, and the falling rain fits itself to these contours. Your own thoughts, dreams, intents, emotions, beliefs, these are the natural features of your mind, so that information impinging upon your mental world also follows those contours. If there is a gully in your backyard, it will always collect the rain that falls. Your beliefs are like receptive areas, open basins that you use to collect information. Intrusive data will often fall into these basins, taking on their contours, of course. Beliefs are ways of structuring reality. If you overstructure reality, however, you will end up with a formal mental garden whose precise display may be so rigidly structured that the natural aspect of the plants and the flowers is completely obscured. Even your dream information then will flow into structured patterns. You know that the natural world changes its form constantly. Objects, however, follow certain laws of physical nature as you experience them, just as violets on the ground do not suddenly change into rocks. These conditions, however, only exist at the conscious level of your perception. The larger psyche deals with a greater dimension of events, and the dream state itself is like a laboratory in which your waking reality is constructed. The physical earth is bombarded by cosmic rays and by other phenomena that you do not perceive, yet they are highly important to your survival. The psyche is bombarded in the same way by phenomena important to your survival. In the laboratory of dreams, this information is processed, collected, and finally formed into the dreams that you may or may not remember, dreams that are already translations of other events. Each dream you remember is quite legitimate in the form in which you recall it. For the information has been broken down, so to speak, fitting the contours of your own intents and purposes. But such a dream is also a symbol for another unrecalled event, a consciously unrecorded falling star, and a clue as to how any environment is formed. In a manner of speaking, dream reality is closer to the true nature of events than your experience with physical events leads you to suppose. Dreams often seem chaotic because your point of reference is too small to contain the added dimensions of actuality. Again, in a manner of speaking, events are far more circular in nature. In dreams, you can experience the past or future. Physical events are actually formed now in your terms because of the interactions between past and future, which are not separate in actuality, but only in your perception. A dream is like the snap of a rubber band, but it is not the rubber band. You read newspapers and keep in constant physical communication with others of your kind. The news affects future events. Individuals and governments take such communications into consideration when they make their decisions. The newspapers are not the events that they discuss, though they are their own kind of events. The written news story is actually composed of a group of symbols. Through reading, you learn how to interpret these. If you watch news on television, you have a larger view of a given news event. When you are viewing a war in a newscast, however, you are still not watching people die. You are watching symbols translated into images that are then visually perceived. The images stand for the people, but they are not the people. The symbols carry the message, but they are not the event they depict. Some of your dreams are like newspaper stories, informing you of events that have happened in other portions of the psyche. Others are like televised news picture, carrying perhaps more information about the event, but still not containing it. Psychologically and physically, however, you send out dream bulletins, all the while in a constant inner communication. On this level, individual dreams help form mass reality, yet also to some extent arise from it in the same way that local weather conditions contribute to world weather conditions, while they are formed by them at the same time. Your Earth exists in the context of the physical universe. You exist in the context of your psyche. The events that you recognize as real are dependent upon all other events occurring within your psyche, even as the existence of the Earth is dependent upon the other aspects of the physical universe. Events, as you understand them, are only intrusions of multidimensional activities into space and time. Events are reflections of your dreams, even as your dreams reflect the events that you know, those you experienced and those you anticipate in one way or another. In a manner of speaking, then, without denying the great validity of your experience, events, as you know them, are but fragments of other happenings in which you are also intimately involved. The inner multidimensional shape of events occurs in a framework that you cannot structure, however, because as a rule you are not focused in that direction. You prefer to deal with activities that can be physically manipulated. The physical manipulation of events is indeed a psychological knack of considerable merit, in which consciousness and attention are exuberantly and wholeheartedly focused, bringing vitality and meaning to one relatively small range of activity. Again, I do not mean to deny the validity of that experience, but to point out its specialized nature. By its nature, however, that precise specialization and tuning of consciousness into space and time largely precludes other less specialized encounters with reality. I'm going to read that sentence again. By its nature, however, that precise specialization and tuning of consciousness into space and time largely precludes other less specialized encounters with realities. Dreams often present you with what seems to be an ambiguity, an opaqueness, since they lack the immediate impact of psychological activity with time and space. From your viewpoint, it seems often that dreams are not events, or that they happen but do not happen. The lack of normal time and space intersections means that you cannot share your dreams with others in the way that you can share waking events, nor can you remember dream events, or so it seems, as you do in your normal conscious experience. In actual fact, you remember consciously only certain highlighted events of your lives, and ordinary details of your days vanish, as dreams seem to. You have a dream memory, of course, though you are not aware of it as a rule. There is a craft involved in the formation of events. You perform this craft well in dreaming. Event making begins before your birth, and the dreams of unborn children and their mothers often merge. The dreams of those about to die often involve dream structures that already prepare them for future existence. In fact, towards death, a great dream acceleration is involved as new probabilities are considered. A dream acceleration that provides psychic impetus for new birth. Some of this is most difficult to explain, yet it is true to say that no event has a beginning or ending. This is true of a life. It is true of a dream. The information is not practical in your terms because it denies your direct experience. Upon request, however, with some practice, you can suggest in the middle of a dream that it expand to its larger proportions. You would then experience one dream wrapped in another, or several occurring at the same time, all involving aspects of a particular theme or probability, with each connected to the others, although to you the connection might not be apparent. Each event of your life is contained within each other event. In the same way, each lifetime is contained in each other lifetime. The feeling of reality is truer than in the dream state. You can become consciously aware of your dreams to some extent, that is, consciously aware of your own dreaming. You can also allow your dream self greater expression in the waking state. This can be done through techniques that are largely connected with creativity. Creativity connects waking and dreaming reality and is in itself a threshold in which the waking and dreaming selves merge to form constructs that belong equally to each reality. You cannot begin to understand how you form the physical events of your lives unless you understand the connection between creativity, dreams, play, and those events that form your waking hours. In one respect, dreams are a kind of structured, unconscious play. Your mind dreams in joyful pleasure at using itself. Freed from the concerns of practical living, dreams are the mind's free play. The spontaneous activity, however, is at the same time training in the art of forming practical events. Probabilities can be juggled, tried out without physical consequences. The mind follows its natural bents. It has far more energy than you allow it to use, and it releases this in great fantasies from which you will choose facts that you will experience. At the same time, dreaming is an art of the highest nature in which all are proficient. There are structured dreams as there are structured games in waking life. There are mass dreams attended by many. There are themes, both mass and private, that serve as a basis, a framework. Yet, overall, the mind's spontaneous activity continues because it enjoys its own activities.